They declared me forgotten. They deleted my name from every record, edited me out of photos like I was never part of the frame, and when I walked away the first time, I heard someone whisper, "She won't be coming back." But what they didn't know was I was still watching. I saw them raise glasses in my absence, clink crystal as if they'd buried something shameful. I watched them repost each other's filtered versions of the truth, crafting stories that made me the villain, or worse, irrelevant. I stayed quiet. I let them build their towers of lies, floor by floor, brick by brick. But every empire built on betrayal eventually forgets to guard its gates. So when I walked in, uninvited, unannounced, and unbroken, they froze. And I said, "You erased me like I was a mistake. But I remember everything." You ever wonder what it feels like to disappear before your body ever leaves a room? That's what it felt like when the people I trusted the most decided I was no longer useful, no longer needed, no longer worthy of acknowledgement. They didn't kill me. They made me invisible. But before I tell you what I said when I finally returned, let me take you to the moment it all started to unravel. Because sometimes, the silence before the storm is louder than the thunder itself. It was a Thursday afternoon when I first sensed it, noticed it really. The shift in how people greeted me, forced smiles, eyes that darted behind me as if searching for someone more important. You'd think, after giving 6 years of my life to that company, they'd at least pretend better. I was Claire Reynolds, former media strategist, head of campaigns, the one who'd turned a sinking brand into a viral success. I wasn't just good at my job. I was the job. But success breeds resentment, especially when it comes from someone who wasn't supposed to win. I was the quiet one, the safe bet. The woman behind the scenes, pulling levers, making magic, and never asking for credit. They loved that version of me. Until they didn't. It started subtly, my name missing from the email threads I used to lead. Campaigns launched without my signature. Strategy meetings I used to chair were suddenly rescheduled without notice. Then one day, I walked into the boardroom where my ideas used to echo, and someone else was sitting in my seat. Literally, Angela, with her manicured confidence and someone else's borrowed brilliance, smiled like she belonged. "Claire, didn't think you were coming to this one," she chirped. "This one? It was my project." But in that moment I understood. I'd already been replaced. Not officially, not publicly, but in every way that mattered. I went home that night and stared at myself in the mirror longer than I had in years. My reflection didn't show weakness. It showed something worse, compliance. I had let it happen. Let them dim me. Let them rearrange the world I helped build, as if I was never there. I was so good at making others shine, I forgot to save some light for myself. I remember sitting in my apartment that weekend, surrounded by half-filled notebooks, crumpled post-its, and a haunting silence. Not a single call. Not a single text. Not from coworkers. Not from friends. Not even from my boss. I existed. But only to myself. And yet something stirred inside me. Something old. Something stubborn. I remembered who I was before their approval became my oxygen. Before my worth depended on likes, metrics, and manufactured applause. I remembered being 16, barefoot on a kitchen chair, presenting a fake commercial for my mom's spaghetti sauce to an invisible camera. I remembered being 19, broke and brazen, walking into my first marketing internship and boldly telling the manager, "I can make your brand famous." I remembered being fearless. So I stopped waiting for an apology. I stopped hoping they'd realize what they lost. I started building, quietly, steadily, obsessively. I started waking up at 4 a.m., outlining ideas. I took freelance clients they didn't know about. I poured everything they dismissed into something they could never control, my own name. And while they toasted to my disappearance, I was designing my comeback. But even comebacks need the perfect moment. That came one rainy evening, almost a year after they ghosted me from my own legacy. I got an email. The same company was hosting a gala, a celebration of their historic campaign wins. The ones I had built. I wasn't invited, but someone leaked the guest list. And every name that had once leaned on my ideas like crutches was listed, except mine. That's when I knew it was time. I didn't need an invitation to return to what was always mine. I just needed to walk in. And when I did, wearing the deep burgundy suit they'd once mocked as too bold for a strategist, heels echoing like truth across polished marble, I saw it.
Shock. Guilt. Fear.
Because ghosts don't show up in velvet and confidence. They tried to act natural. One guy raised his glass. Claire, it's been so long. I smiled, slow and steady. Not long enough to forget. Angela approached, her voice brittle. You look different. I look like myself, I said. That room had once applauded when I spoke. Now, it echoed with unspoken confessions. And then I said it. To the whole room. To the ones who clipped my wings and called it feedback. To the ones who took credit and handed me silence. I said, you declared me forgotten. But I was never gone. I was just learning how to rise without your permission. People think becoming strong happens in a moment. Like one day, you just wake up, clench your fists, square your shoulders, and become someone no one can overlook. But it's slower than that. Messier. Sometimes strength grows in silence, in the places where people forget to look. And if you really want to understand how I got here, how Claire Reynolds became the woman who walked back into the lion's den uninvited, you have to know where it started. Not at the company, not at the betrayal, but way before that. I was born in Asheville, North Carolina, a small town cradled by mountains and wrapped in the smell of rain and pine. My mother, Elise, was a waitress who loved jazz and old movies. My father? He left when I was 4. All I remember is a tall man with a camera who said he'd be right back, and never was. So I grew up with absence. And a mother who smiled through exhaustion and made magic out of pennies. We didn't have much, but Mom always had big dreams for me. She used to say, Claire, the world doesn't give you a spotlight. You build one and drag it with you. She taught me how to be seen without asking for permission. But the world didn't make it easy. Not for a girl like me, soft-spoken, book-obsessed, always observing, always planning. In high school, I wasn't the cheerleader or the party girl. I was the one editing the yearbook, organizing fundraisers, staying late to rearrange flyers while the others took selfies. Still, people noticed. Because even when I was quiet, I made things happen. When I was 17, I entered a statewide ad competition on a whim. The prompt was to design a campaign for a fictional eco-friendly product. I didn't just submit a poster. I made a pitch video, a full brand identity, even a jingle. I won. But no one at school mentioned it. Not the teachers. Not the students. No one celebrated me. Except my mom. She baked a cake, wrote Future CEO in shaky icing, and told me that the world's silence wasn't my failure. It was their fear of my volume. I carried that with me. College was my ticket out. I earned a scholarship to NYU, majored in marketing and minored in psychology. I figured if I could understand why people buy, I could control the world. My first year, I interned at a boutique ad agency in Brooklyn. I worked insane hours for zero pay and constant criticism. The creative director, Josh Taylor, was brilliant and brutal.
But he noticed me.
You've got edge, he said once, after tearing apart one of my concepts.
Rough.
But sharp. By the time I graduated, I had portfolio pieces people 10 years older than me envied. I moved fast after that. At 25, I landed a job as a junior strategist at Vanture, one of those sleek Manhattan firms with glass walls, cold brew on tap, and smiles that cut like razors. It was there I met the people who would eventually try to erase me. Angela Porter. Tyler Chase. Derek Maddox. Angela was all style and sparkle, head of client experience, the kind who could charm CEOs and stab you in the back without breaking eye contact. Tyler was numbers, obsessed with metrics, dashboards, performance graphs. Derek was the VP, the puppeteer. And then there was me, the underdog, the new girl with wild ideas and a southern accent no one took seriously. At first, I played by their rules. I dressed like them,
Spoke like them.
smiled through their backhanded compliments and subtle condescension. But I also worked like no one else. I studied trends like they were ancient scrolls. I dissected data, rewrote briefs, pitched ideas at 2 a.m. I stayed invisible but invaluable. In my third year, I pitched a campaign for a failing outdoor apparel brand. Everyone else wanted influencers and billboards. I said, let's make it personal. Real stories. User-generated content. Hikers, campers, moms, kids. Show the dirt under the nails. It went viral, doubled their engagement, saved the brand. And for the first time, they looked at me like I belonged. But belonging is a tricky thing. It's often a leash disguised as a trophy. With each success, I was praised, quietly. Behind doors, Angela would say, "You're my secret weapon," while presenting my ideas as hers. Tyler started asking for my insights and dressing them in charts with his name on top. Derek said, "You're going places," but never gave me a raise.
Never promoted me.
Always one excuse. "Not yet, Claire. Let's wait for Q4. Let's see next year." I stayed. I told myself it was loyalty, but really, it was fear. Fear that without their validation, I was nothing. That without that company, I didn't exist. Outside of work, I didn't have much of a life. No husband, no kids. A couple of friends I'd text once a week, but most weekends were spent with my laptop, curled on the couch, tinkering with campaigns, reading case studies, trying to stay one step ahead. That loneliness was disguised as ambition. I told myself I was too focused to be distracted by dating or drama. But the truth? I didn't know how to be loved by someone who didn't need something from me. So I stayed inside my work. And when that was taken, when they began freezing me out, it felt like the ground vanished beneath me. You know what's terrifying? Not a loud betrayal. A silent one. The kind that creeps in slowly. The kind where people stop saying hello. Where meetings happen without you. Where laughter echoes down hallways you're no longer invited to walk. I confronted Angela once. I asked her why I was being sidelined. She smiled, sipped her matcha, and said, "Claire, you've just outgrown the role. We're evolving. Maybe it's time you did too." She said it like she was giving me permission to disappear. And for a while I almost did. But here's what they didn't understand. I had spent my entire life learning how to exist in the shadows. They thought they were erasing me. But really, they were just sending me home. Back to myself. Back to the girl who made a jingle with a cracked laptop. Back to the woman who built her own light. That's when I began planning my exit. Not a resignation, but a rebirth. In those quiet months, I rebuilt. I took online courses. Brushed up on behavioral science, brand psychology, and digital growth hacking. I worked with small businesses on the side, helping them turn stagnant sales into six-figure launches. And I documented everything. Not for a resume. For a reveal. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted their recognition. And most of all, I wanted me back. So by the time that gala invitation leaked, I wasn't just ready to walk into the room again. I was ready to own it. To walk into the place where they declared me forgotten, with fire in my voice and years of silence burning behind my eyes. It started with whispers. Not loud enough to be addressed. Not direct enough to be confronted. Just there. In the corners of rooms. On Slack threads where I was no longer tagged. In decisions that were made without me. And yet, when I asked if something was wrong, if I had made a mistake, I was met with that polished, professional poison. "No, Claire. You're doing great. We just have a new direction." New direction. Corporate code for, "You're no longer part of the plan." It wasn't just the meetings they didn't invite me to. It was the way they looked through me. Like I was already gone. Angela, who once leaned on me for strategy, now C-suite interns instead. Tyler, who used to thank me for saving campaigns, now shot me looks like I was an outdated machine waiting to be recycled. And Derek? He avoided me completely. I realized it wasn't a shift. It was a decision. One that had already been made. They just hadn't told me yet. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning. I was called into a quick sync with HR. That's what they called it. A sync. Like it was a routine software update, not the dismantling of someone's reality. Samantha from HR looked at me, with that glassy-eyed empathy companies teach at workshops. Claire, we're restructuring. Your role has been deemed non-essential to the new model. Non-essential. After 6 years. After building departments from scratch. After saving accounts that were hemorrhaging money. I was non-essential. I sat in silence as they handed me the envelope. No one even had the courage to say, "Thank you." I packed my things that afternoon. No announcement. No farewell email from leadership. No goodbye party. Just silence. A few coworkers came to hug me.
Some were genuine.
Most were just scared. Scared that if they stood too close to me, they'd be next. I remember walking out of that glass building and into the Manhattan wind with one thought. I didn't lose my job. They lost their compass. The months that followed were dark. Grief doesn't only come from death. It comes from identity loss, from betrayal, from the slow realization that everything you built was handed off to someone else the moment you became inconvenient. I tried applying to other companies, but the calls never came. And when they did, the offers were insulting. Half my previous salary, no benefits, no room to grow. It was like someone had rewritten my narrative without asking for my input. One evening, I Googled my name just to feel something. What I found? A LinkedIn article written by Angela. She quoted my campaign, word for word, without attribution. She was taking credit for my legacy. And in the comments, Derek congratulated her. "Brilliant insight, Angela. You've really elevated the brand in the last year." The last year. The year I was gone. I should have cried. But I didn't. Something hardened inside me. A quiet rage. Not the kind that burns out. The kind that builds. That's the moment I stopped trying to get back in. And started planning how I'd rewrite the story from the outside. I launched a brand consulting collective. Small at first, just me and 2 other former colleagues who had also been pushed out of venture. We worked from coffee shops and tiny co-working spaces. We took on clients no one else wanted, indie publishers, handmade skincare brands, mom and pop tech companies. And we turned them into monsters. Viral growth, organic traction, revenue spikes. Not with big budgets, with strategy. My kind of strategy. We didn't buy attention. We earned it. Meanwhile, I kept watching venture. I tracked every campaign. Every flop. Every failed attempt to replicate my methods. They started hemorrhaging clients. One of my ex-colleagues, now part of my team, forwarded me an internal email chain. Derek was desperate. Clients were leaving. The new campaigns lacked emotional resonance. They were empty without the heart I used to give them. That's when I knew. They hadn't forgotten me.
They were haunted by me.
So when I learned about the gala, the anniversary of the turnaround year, I knew I had to go. Not for revenge. Not to reclaim anything. But to remind them of what can never be erased. I walked into that marble lobby like I was walking into a courtroom. Every head turned. Not because of the outfit, but because of the audacity. I wasn't supposed to exist in their world anymore. Angela blinked like I was a ghost. Derek nearly choked on his drink. Tyler looked away. No one said a word. So I spoke first. I walked up to Angela, held her gaze, and said, "You're welcome." She tilted her head, confused.
"For what?" she asked.
"For everything you've built with the foundation I laid beneath your feet." Her smile wavered. "Claire, you weren't invited to this." I didn't need an invitation. I built this party. I turned to the crowd, raised my glass, and said, "To everyone who ever thought silence meant surrender, you mistook my absence for defeat." But I wasn't gone. I was building something you couldn't touch. The room went quiet. Some people clapped. Others just stared. But it didn't matter. I didn't come for their approval. I came for my own reflection, so I could see myself standing tall in the ruins of what tried to bury me. Later that night, Derek approached me. He looked older, smaller. "Claire," he said, "I made a mistake." I nodded.
"Yes."
"You did. We'd love to talk about possibly bringing you back in some way. Maybe consult on upcoming campaigns." I stopped him. "You don't get to hire the fire you tried to extinguish." That night, I left the gala before dessert. Not because I was unwelcome, because I was done. And nothing tastes sweeter than walking away with your dignity intact and your enemies choking on regret. There are moments in life when the world turns slow. Not because time changes, but because you've changed. You've survived the betrayal, the silence, the erasure. And now you stand in the ashes, not waiting for applause, but recognizing the power of your own survival. After the gala, everything shifted. Not in their world. In mine. I didn't leave that night seeking revenge. But the universe has a strange way of rewarding the resilient. 2 weeks later, I received an email. Subject line: Urgent opportunity, Fortune 500 brand. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I opened it. It was from the VP of Marketing at Kyanics, a global skincare conglomerate. We've been following your campaigns, the email read. The emotional resonance, the authentic tone. Your work stands apart. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding a multi-year contract for full-scale brand strategy. I sat still for a moment. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. In the meeting, they showed me their deck. Our previous consultants couldn't deliver anything beyond surface-level narratives. We need heart, storytelling that cuts through. We heard your name from 3 separate sources. And then the slide flipped. On the screen, a list of firms they'd interviewed. Vanture was on it. Crossed out. They hadn't even made it past round 1. My team, and I got to work. We didn't just refresh Kyanics' brand. We rebuilt it. We took their tired, oversaturated image and humanized it. We launched a campaign that wasn't about products, but about people. Their customers. Their skin journeys. Their real, flawed, beautiful stories. Sales skyrocketed. Engagement doubled. We were featured in Forbes and Adweek. Suddenly, the industry was talking. Not about Vanture. About us. But the moment that marked the true climax wasn't in a meeting room or on a stage. It happened in a bookstore. I was browsing the memoirs section when a voice called my name. Claire? I turned. It was Ava, an old intern from Vanture. Quiet, observant, overlooked. She looked different now, confident,
Polished.
but her eyes still held the same warmth. I saw your campaign with Kyanics, she said. It changed everything for me. The way you told those stories, it gave me the courage to quit Vanture and start my own creative studio. I smiled. That's incredible. I'm proud of you. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. They tried to erase you, but you became a blueprint instead. The words landed like a final puzzle piece. All this time, I'd thought I was building away from the place that discarded me. But in truth, I was building beyond it. Around that same time, I was invited to speak at an elite women's leadership conference in Boston. Theme: From Forgotten to Fearless. The night before, I sat in my hotel room, rewriting my speech. Not for polish, not for perfection, but for truth. When I took the stage the next morning, I looked out at hundreds of faces, women with doubt in their eyes and dreams in their hearts. And I began with this. A few years ago, I was told I was non-essential, forgotten, silenced. But here's what they didn't understand. You can't delete a woman who knows her worth. You can't silence a voice that learned to sing in isolation. And you sure as hell can't forget someone who's just getting started. The audience rose to their feet. Not because I was flawless, but because I was proof. Proof that rejection isn't the end. It's a redirection. A divine reroute towards something real. Months passed. We grew. My company, Reclaim Strategy Collective, expanded to 6 full-time creatives, 15 freelancers, and clients spanning 5 countries.
We weren't the biggest.
But we were unforgettable. Our motto: built from the broken, designed to rise. Then came the email I never expected. Subject: Let's talk, a different kind of collaboration. Sender: Derek. I stared at it for 10 full minutes. Curiosity won. I opened it. Claire. It's been a long time. I wanted to reach out not with a pitch, but with sincerity. The truth is, we made mistakes. We let ego and fear lead our decisions. Vanture has lost its identity. And the leadership team, well, we now realize what we had when we had you. Would you consider sitting down, not as an employee or a candidate, but as a potential partner? Respectfully, Derek. I closed the laptop. Not out of anger, but peace. The kind that only comes when you've won your own story. I never replied, because sometimes the loudest answer is silence. A year later, I stood at the rooftop launch of our new studio space in Brooklyn. String lights, jazz band, clients mingling with creatives, laughter in the air. Ava gave a toast to the woman they tried to forget, but who made herself unforgettable. Glasses clinked. I looked out over the skyline, and I whispered to the wind, "This is what they tried to bury." Because the truth is, they never erased me. They just cleared the path for my becoming. So here we are. If you've made it this far, maybe you see parts of yourself in my story. Maybe you've been underestimated, discarded, or overlooked. Maybe you've been the quiet one in meetings, the one who carries the weight of a team but never gets the credit. Maybe you've been replaced, not because you weren't enough, but because you were too much for people who preferred silence over strength. Or maybe you felt what I once did. That bitter ache of being declared forgotten while your heart still beats with ideas, still burns with purpose. I'm here to tell you something no boardroom will announce and no corporate memo will ever include. You are not forgettable. You are unforgettable. You are essential. You are the blueprint. And not because of where you've worked, or the names on your resume, or the titles you've held, but because of how you rise. Because of how you love your craft, even when no one's watching. Because of how you rebuild after everything is torn down. Because of how you walk back into a room that once erased you and say, "You needed me. You just didn't know it." I didn't win because I shouted louder. I didn't win because I played the politics better. I won because I remembered who I was when they tried to make me forget. You see, being declared forgotten isn't the same as being gone. It's a pause, not a period. It's the chapter before your greatest rewrite. So, if you're sitting there wondering, what's next? If you're watching people take credit for your work, if you've been left out of rooms you helped build, hear this. They can take your seat, but they can't take your story. They can replace your title, but not your talent. They can forget your name, but never your impact. Now, I want you to imagine something with me. Picture yourself 5 years from now. What does that version of you look like? Not the version they tried to shrink. Not the version they reduced. But the version you're becoming. The one with fire in her eyes and purpose in her steps. The one who didn't just survive the storm. She learned how to dance in it. That version of you? She's already inside you. She's waiting for you to stop asking for permission. You don't need an invitation to your own greatness. You don't need a job title to validate your genius. And you sure don't need their approval to reclaim your narrative. The comeback isn't loud. It's steady. It's deliberate. It's yours. So here's my call to you, the woman reading this with quiet hope. Go build the thing they said you weren't ready for. Go pitch the idea they rolled their eyes at. Go write the book, launch the business, apply for the position, or walk into the gala. And say the thing they never saw coming. Because I promise you this. One day, they'll look back. They'll scroll your name. They'll read your impact. And in hushed tones, they'll say, "We made a mistake. She wasn't forgettable. She was the future." This is more than a story. It's a mirror. And I hope when you look into it, you don't just see me. You see the version of you that's been waiting to rise. So take a breath. Gather your pieces. And say the words they never expected. I'm not gone. I was becoming. Because the next time you walk into that room, they won't forget. They'll remember everything.